30 Days Adrift. How I kept my family alive when our yacht disappeared beneath us. The salt had transformed my daughter's hair into something unrecognizable. Stiff, crystallized strands that caught the morning light like tiny prisms. She hadn't complained about it in days. None of us complained about anything anymore. Words were precious resources on day 23, conserved like the half-inch of fresh water sloshing at the bottom of our emergency canister. I watched Emma's chest rise and fall as she slept, curled against her mother in the center of our life raft. A pathetic orange bubble that had become our entire world. The constant rocking had long ceased to register in our consciousness. My son Ben sat at the opposite edge, methodically checking the integrity of our rain collection system. An elaborate contraption of plastic sheeting and empty bottles that had saved our lives twice now. No one tells you how your mind fractures in the open ocean. How the line between determination and madness blurs with each passing hour. How you catch yourself having full conversations with seabirds that circle overhead, wondering if they see you as salvation or an eventual meal. I flexed my blistered hands, the skin cracked and peeling from constant exposure. The compass on my waterproof watch confirmed what I already knew. We were still drifting southeast, further from shipping lanes, further from rescue, further from the life we once knew. My wife Sarah's eyes fluttered open, immediately finding mine. 24 years of marriage distilled into a single glance that asked the question neither of us dared voice aloud. Is today the day someone finds us? I forced a smile that felt like a grimace across my sunburned face. Who wants breakfast? I announced with manufactured cheerfulness, reaching for our pitiful supply cache. This is how we survived, one cruel sunrise after another. This is how we became the family that disappeared at sea, only to emerge from the Atlantic 30 days later, forever changed. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning. The Windward Promise wasn't the largest yacht in the marina, but she was ours. 42 feet of freedom that represented 5 years of savings and a lifetime of dreams. Sarah had initially opposed the purchase, calling it my floating midlife crisis. But even she had fallen in love with the sleek lines and teak deck. Our maiden voyage as a family was meant to be a 3-week journey from Florida to Bermuda and back. Nothing too ambitious, but adventurous enough to christen our new lifestyle. The weather forecast had been favorable that morning as we pulled away from the dock. Emma, 16 and perpetually bored with family activities, had at least put down her phone long enough to help with the mainsail. Ben, 14 and obsessed with marine biology, was already hanging over the side scanning for dolphins. "You sure you know what you're doing, Captain?" Sarah had teased, slipping her arm around my waist as I stood at the helm. "Not even remotely," I'd replied with a wink. But the YouTube tutorials seemed pretty straightforward. That joke would haunt me later. The first 3 days had been postcard perfect. Cobalt skies meeting azure waters, gentle winds filling our sails, and evenings spent playing cards in the cabin while the stars performed overhead. Even Emma had admitted it was not totally lame. From Ben, who'd spotted a pod of pilot whales on day 2, we'd received the teenage equivalent of a Nobel Prize. "This is actually cool, Dad." The weather changed on the 4th day. It wasn't dramatic at first. Just a darkening on the horizon that the marine radio described as a developing low-pressure system. I'd checked our course, made some adjustments, and decided we could skirt the eastern edge of it without any real concern. By midnight, I knew I'd made a catastrophic error. The wind had shifted, driving us directly into the strengthening storm. Waves that had been gentle swells hours before now crashed over our bow with frightening force. The barometer plummeted as the yacht pitched violently in the growing chaos. "We need to get below deck," I shouted over the howling wind, rain pelting my face like tiny needles. Sarah was already corralling the kids, her face a mask of controlled panic. I secured the wheel with shaking hands, trying to remember everything I'd learned about heavy weather sailing. The yacht groaned beneath us as another wave slammed against the hull. Something cracked. A sound that registered in my chest more than my ears. We made it to the cabin just as the boat lurched sickeningly to port. Equipment crashed around us as we tried to find handholds, anything to steady ourselves against the violent motion. "Dad?" Ben's voice cracked. "The hull, I think it's..." The sound that followed will remain with me forever. A splintering, tearing cacophony as the windward promise began to break apart beneath us. Water rushed in so quickly it seemed impossible, flooding the cabin in seconds. "Life raft," I screamed, grabbing the emergency duffel I'd stowed but never truly expected to use. "Move! Now!" What happened next exists in my memory as disjointed fragments. Sarah pulling Emma through the companionway as the yacht listed further. Ben grabbing the emergency locator beacon. The cold shock of Atlantic water as I fought to deploy the life raft in raging seas. My family's terrified faces, illuminated by lightning as our home, our dream, slipped beneath the waves. The yacht was gone in minutes. One moment it was there, the next swallowed by the hungry ocean, leaving only debris and 4 stunned survivors clinging to an 8-foot inflatable raft as rain and salt water lashed our faces. Emma was sobbing. Ben was ominously silent. Sarah clutched the emergency beacon like a religious artifact. And I, the man who had brought them all here, the captain who had failed in the most fundamental way. I stared at the spot where our yacht had vanished and felt something inside me crumble. The storm continued to batter us for hours. We clung to each other, soaked and shivering in the darkness, each wave threatening to capsize our fragile sanctuary. Dawn revealed a desolate scene. Open ocean in every direction, scattered possessions floating nearby, and the dawning realization that our emergency beacon might not have activated properly in the chaos. "The Coast Guard will come," I assured my family. The first of many lies I would tell in the coming days. "They know our route. They'll find us by nightfall." Night fell. No one came. By day 3, we had settled into a grim routine. The storm had passed, but it had pushed us far from our planned course. The raft survival kit contained basic supplies, some emergency rations, a solar still for collecting drinking water, fishing line, flares, and a first aid kit. I rationed everything with obsessive precision, measuring water by capful and food by thumbnail-sized portions. "We should be drinking more," Sarah whispered on the 4th night, after the kids had fallen into fitful sleep. "Everything I've read says dehydration is the biggest danger." "Everything you've read wasn't written for 4 people on a life raft with limited supplies," I snapped, immediately regretting my tone. "I'm sorry. I'm just trying to make it last until we're rescued." She squeezed my hand. "I know, but what if..." Just don't say it." But the unspoken question hung between us. What if no one is looking for us? The days blurred together. Sunburn turned to peeling, turned to a leathery tan that aged us all. Emma stopped asking when we'd be rescued. Ben became our resident fisherman, rigging clever traps from the meager supplies. We celebrated his first catch, a small mackerel. Like it was buried treasure, eating every part we could and using the rest as bait. Rain became our salvation in torment. Blessed fresh water that we collected in every available container, but also bone-chilling cold that left us huddled together for warmth. We learned to sleep in shifts, 2 awake watching for ships or threats, 2 sleeping in the center of the raft where it was marginally drier. On day 10, Sarah developed a rash, angry red patches that spread across her back and shoulders from constant exposure to salt water. I used our precious fresh water to clean it, applied antibiotic ointment from the first aid kit, and felt the weight of helplessness press against my chest. "It's not that bad," she insisted, seeing my expression. "Just uncomfortable. We need to get you proper medical attention," I said, staring at the unbroken horizon. All of us. That night, floating under a canopy of stars that seemed both beautiful and mocking, I made a decision. If rescue didn't find us, we would find rescue. I began to study the currents, the position of the sun, the patterns of seabird flights. According to my calculations, we were drifting southeast, potentially toward the Cape Verde Islands or the African coast, though still hundreds of miles away. "We need to start paddling," I announced on day 12. 3 hours a day, taking turns. We can't just drift anymore. Emma, whose teenage cynicism had given way to a surprising stoicism, was the first to volunteer. "We should make a flag too," she suggested, gesturing to her t-shirt. Something bright that ships might see. For the first time since the yacht sank, I felt a flicker of pride cutting through my cloud of guilt. My family was fighting. We were survivors, not victims. The paddling began, exhausting, seemingly futile work that left our arms burning and spirits flagging. But it gave us purpose, something to do besides stare at the endless water and dwindling supplies. Day 15 brought new terror. Ben spotted it first, the triangular fin cutting through the water some 50 yards away. Then another, and another. "Sharks," he whispered, his voice cracking. 3 of them. We froze, watching the predators circle our tiny refuge. Were they curious? Hungry? Just passing by? None of us knew enough about shark behavior to guess their intentions, but the primal fear they inspired needed no explanation. "Everyone in the center of the raft," I ordered, keeping my voice low and steady despite my racing heart. No sudden movements, no dangling anything in the water. For 4 hours, the sharks circled, sometimes disappearing beneath the surface, only to reappear closer to the raft. Each pass sent fresh waves of panic through us. Emma silently cried against her mother's shoulder. Ben, our animal enthusiast, whispered facts about shark species that no one wanted to hear. "They're probably just curious," he insisted. "If they wanted to attack, they would have already." Whether he was right or simply lucky, the sharks eventually lost interest and disappeared into the deep. But the encounter left a lasting mark on our psyches. The ocean, which had already taken our yacht and freedom, now revealed itself as a predatory domain where we were hopelessly outmatched. That night, as the others slept, I counted our remaining supplies. 2 days of emergency rations, 4 days of water if we maintained our current consumption. The fishing had been inconsistent. Rain was unpredictable. I stared at the stars, searching for patterns I recognized, trying to calculate our position. Without proper navigation equipment, it was little more than guesswork. But what choice did we have? Sitting and waiting for rescue that might never come wasn't an option anymore. Somehow, despite everything, I fell asleep watching the constellations wheel overhead. In my dreams, the sharks returned, their sleek bodies transforming into the broken hull of the Windward Promise, circling us with accusation in their dead glass eyes. Day 16 dawned with a new challenge. Emma woke with swollen lips and complained of dizziness. I recognized the symptoms immediately. The beginning stages of salt poisoning from accidentally ingesting too much seawater. "We need to give her more fresh water," Sarah insisted, already reaching for our precious supply. "If we give her extra, we all run out sooner," I said, hating myself for the calculation but unable to ignore the reality. "She's 16, James," Sarah hissed, using my name like a weapon. "Your daughter is sick." The unspoken accusation hung between us. "This is your fault. All of it." She was right, of course. I divided the day's water ration, giving Emma a double portion and taking none for myself. When Sarah tried to share hers with me, I refused. "Dad needs to drink too," Ben said quietly, offering me half his cup. I accepted it only because refusing would upset him more. The moment crystallized something I'd been feeling since the yacht sank. My children were no longer children. Crisis had forced them into an adulthood they weren't ready for, made them partners in survival rather than dependents to protect. Emma improved by evening, though her lips remained cracked and bloody. We'd used nearly all our medical supplies treating her and Sarah's rash, the emergency kit, designed for temporary use until rescue, was never meant to sustain 4 people for what was becoming an indefinite ordeal. That night, I made another decision. I stopped lying to my family. "I don't think anyone's looking for us anymore," I said as we huddled together beneath a sky streaked with fading light. "It's been over 2 weeks. Search patterns rarely extend this long, especially with no signal from our beacon." I expected tears, accusations, panic. Instead, I received quiet nods. They'd known. Perhaps they'd known longer than I had. "So, what do we do?" Ben asked. "We save ourselves," I replied. "We keep paddling southeast. We fish more aggressively. We collect every drop of rain. And we do not, under any circumstances, give up." Sarah reached for my hand in the darkness. Her touch said what words couldn't. That despite everything, despite my catastrophic failure as captain, as protector, as father, she was still beside me. We would face this together. "One day at a time," she whispered, echoing the phrase from her recovery meetings years ago. Just one day at a time. It became our mantra as we entered the 3rd week adrift. One day, one challenge, one small victory at a time. Day 20 brought a miracle that nearly killed us. A distant rumble pulled me from restless sleep just before dawn. At first, I thought it was thunder, another storm approaching to test our resolve. But the sound was too rhythmic, too mechanical. "Ship," I croaked, my voice hoarse from dehydration. "Ship!" We scrambled for the emergency flares, hands trembling as we tried to load the flare gun with sun-cracked fingers. The silhouette was visible now, a massive cargo vessel cutting up through the morning haze, perhaps 2 miles distant, but moving parallel to our position. "Hurry!" Sarah screamed, as Emma and Ben waved their makeshift flag frantically. I fired the flare. The red streak arced beautifully against the pale sky, burning bright for precious seconds before fading. We held our breath, watching the ship continue its course without deviation. "They didn't see it," Emma whispered, devastation etched across her face. "We have 2 more," I said, reloading with shaking hands. "We save one. This is our chance." The second flare soared higher, burning even brighter in the strengthening dawn light. We screamed until our throats burned, waving anything that might catch attention. The ship continued its path, indifferent to our desperation. Something broke inside me then. 3 weeks of carefully maintained composure shattered as I watched our salvation disappear. I fired our last flare without consulting anyone, watched it rise and fall with no response, and then collapsed in the center of the raft, body racked with silent sobs. Sarah moved beside me, her arms encircling my shoulders. Ben and Emma joined, creating a huddle of shared grief and exhaustion. We had gambled our last emergency signals on a ship that never saw us, and now we truly had nothing but ourselves. "It means there are shipping lanes nearby," Ben said finally, his voice strangely adult. "We're not in the middle of nowhere. There will be others." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. But watching that vessel disappear over the horizon had crushed something vital inside me. For the first time, I allowed myself to consider that we might not survive this. That evening, as if sensing our despair, the ocean offered a gift. A school of small fish swarmed near our raft, dozens of them darting just beneath the surface. Ben and I used our makeshift fishing gear with frantic energy, catching 7 before the school moved on. We ate better that night than we had in weeks. The fresh protein revitalized our bodies, if not our spirits. As we carefully saved the bones and remains for future bait, I noticed Sarah staring at the horizon where the ship had disappeared. "We'll make it," she said without looking at me. "All 4 of us, together." I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Promise me, James," she insisted, finally turning to meet my eyes. "Promise we all make it home." I couldn't make that promise, not honestly. But I nodded again anyway, adding one more lie to the growing collection between us. The 4th week brought new horrors. The skin on our feet and hands had begun to rot from constant exposure to salt water, a condition sailors call immersion foot. Each morning, we carefully dried each other's extremities with the least damp cloth we could find, massaging circulation back into numbed digits. Emma developed a fever on day 25. Without medication, we could only wipe her forehead with precious fresh water and pray her body would fight whatever infection had taken hold. She drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling about school and friends and a normal life that seemed like fiction now. "Talk to her," Sarah urged, her own face gaunt with exhaustion. "Keep her mind here with us." So I told stories, fabricated adventures about what we'd do when we reached land. I described the enormous meal we'd eat, the hot showers we'd take, the soft beds we'd sleep in. I promised her a new phone to replace the one lost with the yacht, new clothes, a vacation anywhere she wanted to go. "Disney World," she murmured through the cracked lips, momentarily lucid. "You always said we'd go next summer." "Disney World it is," I agreed, fighting back tears. "The minute you're better." Ben had become our silent sentinel, constantly scanning the horizon for ships, aircraft, anything that might represent rescue. He spoke rarely now, conserving energy and focus for fishing and collecting rainwater. At 14, he had aged decades in these weeks, his adolescent awkwardness replaced by grim determination. On day 27, Sarah spotted it first, a smudge on the eastern horizon that didn't move like a cloud. "Land," she whispered, afraid to say it louder, as if the word itself might jinx our hope. "I think it's land." We stared for hours, watching the smudge gradually take shape as our raft drifted closer. It was indeed land. A dark, rocky coastline, rising from the water perhaps 10 miles distant. If our paddling had helped guide us here, it was the ocean currents that deserved most of the credit. "We need to time this right," I said, studying the distant shore. "Those rocks could destroy the raft if we approach carelessly. We need to find a beach or cove." New energy surged through our depleted bodies. Emma's fever had broken overnight, leaving her weak but alert. Together, we paddled with renewed purpose, fighting to control our approach to this unknown shore. As we drew closer, details emerged, steep cliffs in some areas, but also what appeared to be a small bay with a narrow beach. I directed our efforts toward this target, praying the currents would cooperate. They didn't. A strong tide pushed us relentlessly toward a jagged outcropping of rocks instead, where waves crashed with enough force to pulverize our fragile craft. We paddled desperately against the current, muscles screaming, progress minimal. "We need to swim for it," I finally announced, seeing no alternative. "Abandon the raft before it hits the rocks. Head for the beach." Terror flashed across my family's faces. None of us had the strength for a long swim, especially in these conditions. But staying with the raft meant certain destruction. "Together," Sarah said firmly. "We go together." We gathered what little we could carry: the emergency knife, our water container, the remains of our fishing line. The rest would have to be abandoned. I helped Emma secure her life vest tighter, then checked Ben's and Sarah's. "When I say go, we all jump toward the beach side," I instructed. "Stay together. If the current separates us, keep swimming parallel to the shore until you find a safe entry point." The rocks loomed closer, perhaps 50 yards away now. We could hear the roar of waves smashing against stone, feel the pull of the water as it rushed toward destruction. "Now!" We plunged into the Atlantic together, the shocking cold stealing our breath despite weeks of exposure. The raft immediately accelerated away from us, drawn toward the rocks by the current. I watched our home of 28 days smash against the jagged shore and deflate within seconds. Swimming was agony. Every muscle protested, every movement a struggle against exhaustion and the powerful tide. I kept Sarah and Emma in sight, but Ben had drifted further south, fighting his own battle against the current. The beach seemed impossible to reach. Always the same distance away, no matter how hard we swam. My limbs grew heavier, my strokes less effective. Twice I swallowed seawater, the salt burning my raw throat. "Just keep moving," I gasped to Sarah and Emma, who struggled nearby. Time lost meaning. There was only the next stroke, the next breath, the next moment of fighting against the ocean that had already taken so much from us. I thought of the sharks and wondered if they were watching, waiting for us to fail. I don't remember reaching the shore. My first clear memory is of sand beneath my face, waves still lapping at my legs, and the sound of labored breathing nearby. I raised my head with monumental effort to see Sarah and Emma collapsed beside me, their bodies heaving with exhaustion. Ben. Where was Ben? Panic gave me strength I didn't possess. I staggered to my feet, scanning the coastline frantically for my son. The beach stretched in both directions, empty save for scattered debris. No sign of him. "Ben!" My scream tore through my damaged throat, echoing against the cliffs. "Benjamin!" Sarah was beside me now, her eyes wild with fear. "Where is he? Did you see him?" We stumbled down the beach, calling his name, searching the water for any sign of our son. Each step was torture, each moment without finding him unbearable. Had we survived 28 days at sea only to lose him within sight of salvation? A movement caught my eye far down the beach, a small figure dragging itself from the surf. I ran, falling twice on unsteady legs before reaching him. Ben lay face down on the sand, coughing violently but alive. I collapsed beside him, gathering his soaked body in my arms as tears of relief streamed down my salt-crusted face. Sarah and Emma reached us moments later, and we formed a huddled mass of sobbing, laughing, broken survivors. We had made it. All of us. The island, we would later learn, was one of the outermost Cape Verde archipelago, a small, rocky outpost with a fishing village on the opposite side from where we'd washed ashore. It took us a full day to traverse the rugged terrain, our bodies pushed beyond any reasonable limit. The fishermen who discovered us thought we were ghosts at first, skeletal figures with leathery skin and wild eyes, speaking in hoarse voices about an American yacht that had sunk a month earlier. They gave us water, wrapped us in blankets, and transported us to the main island, where a small medical facility treated our most urgent conditions. The American embassy arranged our transport home 3 days later. By then, news of our survival had spread internationally. We were the miracle family, lost at sea for 30 days and presumed dead after an intensive Coast Guard search found nothing but floating debris from our yacht. Reporters waited at the hospital, at the airport, outside our home. Everyone wanted the incredible story of survival against impossible odds. They asked about our heroic actions, about conquering the Atlantic, about the adventure we'd survived. I couldn't bring myself to give them what they wanted. There was no glory in what we'd endured, no adventure in watching your children waste away day by day, no heroism in failing to protect your family from a disaster you helped create. The true story wasn't about conquering the ocean. It was about how easily it conquered us, how quickly our civilized veneer washed away to reveal the desperate animals beneath. It was about how survival reduced us to our most basic components: thirst, hunger, fear, and the primal need to continue existing, no matter the cost. 6 months later, the physical scars have mostly healed. The psychological ones may never fade completely. Emma still wakes screaming from nightmares about drowning. Ben rarely speaks about our time at sea, but has covered his bedroom walls with maps showing currents and shipping lanes, as if still plotting our rescue. Sarah attends therapy twice weekly, working through the trauma and the strain it placed on our marriage. As for me, I've developed a strange habit. Each night before bed, I fill a glass with water and place it on my nightstand. I rarely drink it. I just need to see it there, clean, accessible, abundant. Sometimes I wake in a panic, convinced I'm still on that raft with empty containers and cracked lips, the horizon empty in all directions. People ask if I miss the ocean, if I'll ever sail again. They seem disappointed when I laugh at the question. How could I miss something that nearly destroyed everything I love? How could I ever trust those deceptive waters that transformed from playground to predator in the space of a few hours? What I never tell them is the truth that haunts me most. Part of me remains adrift on that raft. Some essential piece of who I was floats still in the Atlantic, circling endlessly between despair and determination, between giving up and going on. In my darkest moments, I wonder if that part will ever find its way home. But then I look at my family, scarred but healing, changed but alive. And I remember what sustained us through 30 days of hell. Not skill or luck, or even the will to survive, though all played their parts. What truly saved us was simpler and more profound. We refused to let go of each other. When the world reduced to a tiny orange raft on an endless sea, we held on. When hope seemed as distant as the unreachable horizon, we held on. When our bodies failed and our minds fractured, still we held on. And somehow, against every probability, that was enough.